Okay, in this video I'll be showing you how to make a single strand wire musky leader. To make a single strand wire musky leader, you need 3 materials and 2 tools. So the materials you're going to need is your single strand wire. In this case I have 174 pound tooth-proof American fishing wire, wire in brown. The second material you're going to need is a swivel. In this case I have a size 4 rolling swivel, and I'll explain why I've selected that over a ball bearing swivel as I make the leader. And I have a size 4 welded ring, and I'll explain why I'm using that instead of snaps when I make this leader. So those are the 3 materials. And then in terms of tools, probably the most important tool is the wire bending pliers. They're simply, you can get any brand you want. They're simply looks like a pair of needle nose pliers, but they're round cones on either sort of tooth of the plier, and then a wire cutting tool just so you can cut the wire to the size you want. Okay, now that I've covered the materials and the tools, I'll move on with preparing the material. There's really only one step in the preparation. That's just to cut the wire to the size you want. So I'm going to get this wire and cut it. Now you'll see that the wire, although it comes packaged rolled up like this, it is quite stiff when you pull it out, and it will kink, so you need to be careful with it. So now that I've pulled that wire out, I'll use my wire cutter and just cut a length so it's easier for me to work with. There we go. For these wire leaders, you want it a bit longer, 2 to 3 inches longer than you intend to use it. I use these single strand wire leaders for jerk baits. I use them mainly for suics, so I have them quite short just because it's the way that I like them. So I have cut this one to about 10 inches. When I'm done with it, it'll be about a 6-inch wire leader, but you can make it any size you want. Okay, now that I've cut the leader wire, I'm going to move on with the first step. Let's move those cutters out of the way. And the first step is we're going to bend the wire using the wire bending pliers. And your first bend should be about 3 inches down the wire, and it's going to be at 45-degree bend. And you see I have it there, the 45-degree bend, and I pinch the wire about midway up my pliers. So I'm going to just do that, and then I'm going to bend the wire like that, about 45 degrees. That's just so you can see the bend there. That works for me. And once you've made that bend, that first bend, the next thing you're going to do, instead of grasping right where you bent it, you're going to move the wire down your pliers to where it's grasped between the smaller diameter ends of your wire bending tool, and you're going to grasp it hard. And then what you're going to do is you're going to use your hand and bend this over, and just watch. So I bend that over, and there's going to be a point where it's difficult to bend anymore. So I'm just going to stop bending it, and then I'm going to manipulate my pliers so they're facing up like this. And then I'm going to continue. Oh, sometimes you really need to apply a lot of pressure, and I'm going to continue to bend it until I have something that looks like this, and it's bent all the way around, just like that. And once I have it bent around like that, the next thing I'm going to do, you got to pay attention to this step, because if you carry on, you'll bend the wire and tie it off before you put your hardware on. So you got to put your first piece of hardware on. In this case, I'll attach the swivel first, and it goes like this. So once that's on, and the next thing is I'm going to wrap this wrap this wire tag end around the main wire. I'm going to make sure I get 3 good wraps. And you do that by just grabbing the wire, just like so. You can grab it with these pliers, just so you're grabbing it the loop you've made, just across so it's flat. And once you've done that, grasp that, you're just going to bend this tag end around the main wire and wrap it around. And it's actually pretty easy to do. And you just bend that around, although you just take your time. And what you're looking for as you bend that around is that you try to bend it so you're getting those wraps so they're close to one another, and they're not overlapping. There's no overlapping wraps. They're just and sometimes you got to use your thumb and force it a little bit. They're just as tight as you can get them. Going around there. Now I have 2 good wraps. I'm coming around on the 3rd, and there we go. You know, if depending on how comfortable you are, if you wanted, there's enough there to do a 4th wrap if you wanted to do it. But I just like to limit the amount of wire I'm putting at one end with the hardware. Otherwise, the end becomes too heavy. So there you go. That's what it should look like. I have my 3 wraps and the tag end sticking up. Now, I think that a lot of people will have the urge to use their wire cutter to cut off this tag end. Just resist the temptation to do that because it'll leave you, if you cut the wire end there, you can see where I've cut it there, it's quite sharp. And it can cut your braid or your running line if it comes in contact with it at the wrong time on a cast, or if you're fighting a fish under the boat. So in this case, it's pretty easy to do. You're just going to rotate that tag end off, and there's just 2 steps to doing that. So again, using my wire bending pliers here, I just grab the flap loop, and I'm going to bend this out. No, bend a little handle here. So that's, and that wire, just like that. And then from this case, all you do, once you have that handle, is all you have to do is take that handle and push it forward or back, and the wire is just going to break. And the way it's going to break is there's not going to be any sharp ends. So you'll see in this case, I'll just push that forward, and sometimes it'll break more quickly than others. You know, probably take half or almost a full rotation, and you're going around, and there, it's snapped off. And as I run my fingers over it, there's no sharp edges. So that's one end of the wire leader. Now I'm going to do the exact same thing on this end and attach my welded ring. So if you recall, the first step is to grasp the wire, give yourself good 2 or 3 inches there, midway up the wire bending tool, and you want to go 45 degrees or thereabouts. There you go. That's good enough for now. 45 degrees. And then what you want to do is go up from the bend just slightly, about 1 millimeter, grab the wire again. So you can see there, I'm not grabbing on the bend, I'm just grabbing down from the bend about 1 millimeter or so, and I'm grabbing it with the wire bending tool near the end of the wire bending tool, where the diameter of the teeth, I guess, or the arms of these pliers is much smaller. And then, without moving the pliers, I'm just going to use my fingers and bend that wire around the round portion of that until it won't go any farther. And you'll see that's about there. And then I just rotate my pliers like so, around, and I finish that bend just like that. And you end up, it's not the prettiest one, but I don't think the fish care. But just like that. And this takes practice. To get a good loop, this one's pretty good here. To get a good loop takes a bit of practice. So anyway, you just leave it like that. And of course, the smaller end you use will give you the smaller loop. So in this case, I'm going to attach my hardware now, which is my welded ring. And the reason I use a welded ring is because I use these single wire leaders specifically on wooden jerk baits, my Suics, and I find that the snaps don't go well through the nose of the nose loop on the Suic. Sometimes they can be a bit smaller, so I always use a split ring on the nose hole on a Suic, and I find that split ring attaches best to this welded ring. It's just the way I like to do it. But you can equally use a snap too if you don't want to use a welded ring. You just feed it on the same way. And once you have that through, just like before, you grasp using your pliers here. You grasp the loop you made flat, and then you just bend around the wire, wrap it around, give yourself 3 real good all the way around wraps, at least 2, and 3. Okay. Let's see if I can. There we go. All right, now that I have that, now I have to snap this off. I'm going to do it the exact same way. This is the point where you wish you gave yourself a bit more tag to work with, but I'll show you that it can be done with a small tag end. So the first thing we want to do is just bend this little handle out, so I have that handle to motor it. There we go. And just like before, I'm just going to push up towards the loop that I made. Just going to grab this using the pliers, the loop here, just because it's difficult to grab with my fingers. Keep pushing that like that. And snapped off just like before. Those are 2 snapped off ends there, you can see. And I'll rub my fingers over it and it's smooth. So there you go. A single strand wire musky leader, in this case with a welded ring, but like I said, if you prefer the snaps, you can use the snaps. I just find with the baits that I use these leaders for, the welded ring works better for me. And you can see it's not a real big leader in this case. You can make them as long as you want. I like them small for my jerk baits with these leaders. But you know, when you look at the size of some of the barrel swivels and you know the weight difference, what I find is that these smaller rolling swivels on these leaders specifically don't weigh it down so much. So you're not getting a jerk where it jerks and it's a big weigh down, and sometimes, you know, depending on the angle of the bait, gets fouled in the front hooks. So there you go. Single strand wire musky leader.